Ellen Isaacson here with part two of my series, Coexisting with Agoraphobia, Anxiety, and Panic. Uh, since I know that most of you who are watching are either challenged with agoraphobia or some kind of anxiety disorder, or are probably a friend or a loved one of someone who is, I feel like I'm among friends, and it's nice to be back. I'd like to start by saying that I'm not going to pretend that I'm a great public speaker, and it would just be easier for me to refer to notes from time to time because my goal is really to get information across to you and not to pretend to be, the world's greatest YouTube presenter. So if I look down at my notes from time to time, please forgive me, but I think I have some important information for you, and I can deliver it best and make it the most complete that I can if I do that. So bear with me, if you will. I'd also like to state that what I think makes my videos different from most of the others on here about this particular subject matter is the fact that I'm not offering a cure for agoraphobia or any kind of anxiety. Um, I think that a better way to approach this is, for me, because if you saw part one of my video series, you know that I have been challenged with this particular disorder for well over 5 decades. And I have chosen to make peace with it and to learn to, as my title suggests, coexist with it, to make room for it in my life, to have it be beside me, so to speak. And it may be a little bit of a stretch to say to embrace it, but in theory, that's the best thing to do. Every day is just what it is, and I live each day the best that I can with it in my life. I've tried all kinds of therapies and medications, and I'm still pretty much at this point still homebound. Doesn't mean I will be forever, doesn't mean you will be forever, but that's where I'm at for right now. So again, as I said, if you saw part one of my series, you'd know that I have been in and out of the house many times throughout my life. I've tried things that have worked for short periods of time, and then sooner or later I found myself back in the house again. So I decided to make a world for myself from my home base. I even had times when I was very young when this thing first quote unquote hit me, when I was around 13 or 14 years old, when I had to be fed under the door of my bedroom. And I've come a long way since then. Those are no longer the days, but I know that we always live in fear that something will come up for us in the course of a day that will trigger us and put us right back to where we were when we first had our worst experiences with anxiety. But for now, in the meantime, what I'm offering is some of the knowledge that I have about how to cope with it, how to live with it. Um, I mentioned also in the first video that it was an email that I got from a reporter from the Tampa Bay Times here. His name is Zach. He was a great guy who found my book online, and the book is written probably in the description below here. And he asked me if I would be willing to do interviews with him uh, about the book and about my life so that he could write an article. I agreed, and I realized that while doing so, I had a lot of information that I could offer. I had to think long and hard about my life, how I have lived with this for all of this time, how I make my life work today. And I thought that that information was valuable enough to share with other people who are um, challenged with it today. Whether you're well on your way to healing and in some particular therapy that works for you, or if you feel like you've tried everything like I did and you still haven't gotten anywhere, but need to have some information about how to cope with it. What I would like to do today is talk about, in particular, some quirks or characteristics, traits that we as a group seem to have in common. People with anxiety disorders, whether it be agoraphobia, and panic attacks is a symptom. that exists for people with anxiety disorders. But we do tend to have a lot of things in common. The first thing that we have in common is that a lot of us are unwilling to take medications. I myself had a lot of adverse reactions to medications when I was, well, not even just when I was younger, but especially in the beginning when I was trying to receive treatment for my anxiety disorder. I went over 25 years undiagnosed, so nobody really even knew what I had, which was unfortunate. But I had a couple of very severe reactions, and because the phobic brain can easily turn almost any situation into an avoidance situation, that's kind of what happened to me. You know, the reactions were so bad to the meds that I decided that it was just better for me to live with the anxiety as best I can. I do take one medication, but it's tried and true. It's familiar. It doesn't work the best, but it's what I use. So we do seem to have that in common. One tip that I did learn about taking medications, if I have to try something new, is to slice the pill, hopefully it's a pill, into small pieces, or even take a razor blade and just shave a piece off and try that. Or you can even make a powder out of it and dip your finger in it and try to taste it and see how that works for you. And if you don't have a reaction to that, then the next day maybe you can take a little more. And that is a very gradual way to try to adapt to new medications. So hopefully that tip will help somebody. We also need to be in control of situations, almost all situations. The need for control for many of us seems to come from a time in our life, perhaps, when we were not able to have control over our lives. It could be taking the form of abuse, or an illness, or some kind of trauma, when we felt that our lives were out of control. So we live in fear that that will happen again. So we're very frightened when situations arise where we're not able to be in control. And that seems to be a common thread for a lot of us. Along those lines is the fact that anything that can make us feel trapped can create an anxiety-filled situation, which goes hand in hand with the need for control, or the trying to control our environment in particular. We set things up if we have to do something, even if it's just somebody coming in to visit, a neighbor. It could be anything where we feel trapped. We try to set it up and control it so that we feel the least amount of confinement as possible. And something I want to say here is people often, I think, view us as very controlling people. And I know I'm here saying that we do need control, but it's not the kind of control that is necessarily so terribly negative. We are not trying to control other people. We are trying to control a situation so that we can make it doable. If we can't see it, if we can't visualize it, we're not going to be able to do it. So we may have to ask for the cooperation of others around us to try to set something up, hence control, so that it might be in small pieces. But that's just the point I wanted to make. Because to me, I always want to let people know that I'm also socially phobic, so bringing new people into my life is difficult. And I try to arrange it like in small doses, have them come for short periods of time, maybe for a particular reason, so we're going to do a little project or something. So that appears like it's all about me and it has to be my way. And in a sense it does, but it's usually only in the beginning. And I'm really asking for help from people to enable me to pull this off. And the more cooperative people are and understanding they are, even if they don't understand the particular problem, if they're willing to work with me to accomplish it, uh, it's going to be much more likely that I'm going to be able to keep them in my life. We can be trapped in even the most common of situations. Situations like taking a shower, the confinement of a shower stall, or for me, sitting at the dinner table was especially difficult. I think it goes back to, again, an early childhood thing where when my mother came home, we were forced to sit at the dinner table and then talk about what happened during the day and maybe got punished for this or that. And that's left an impression on me for forever. So it's a very individual thing, but there are lots of subtle things. Talking to a neighbor outside, if they catch you and you really are not in the mood to talk, or you're feeling particularly anxious and they stop you, it can be very anxiety provoking to have to stand there and talk to somebody, even if somebody comes into your house to visit. And if you're homebound like me, you can't, you can, but you feel like you're being rude if you say, would you please leave? You know, you are stuck until they decide to leave, and that can be very unfortunate. Um, Another thing that we have in common is a sensitivity to light, sound, heat. Uh, it took me a while to find that out. I never realized it, but at the time when I could go out, if I went into a certain store, especially fluorescent lighting can be very triggering for us. Uh, and I always thought knew there was something in that store, but I didn't know what it was. So then I learned to look for particular kinds of lighting, or prepare myself as best I could if it was a place with fluorescent lighting. I'm in Florida. Just going out in the sun sometimes can be very anxiety provoking. Or we are very sensitive people. Our bodies are very sensitive. Our emotions are very sensitive. I can be feeling relatively okay, and it's a bright sunny day, and if a dark cloud passes over, it can change my mood immediately. I can start to feel frightened, and it's just because of the sudden change in my environment. So it's nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, these are our personalities. But if we know what triggers us, you know, we feel less crazy, we feel less abnormal. I hate that word. But it's just who we are. You know, we have certain sensitivities, and it's okay. And the more we accept about ourselves, the better off we will be, and the better we will be able to live in this world comfortably. Um, we often need to do things in very small increments, such as, well, it could be anything. For me, if it's trying to bring a new person in, I may have to see them in very small increments. Ask them to come for 5 minutes, 10 minutes at a time. If you're trying to go out, you know, maybe they always talk about baby steps. Trying to walk to the corner or walk down your street a couple of houses, you know, take 2 steps and then 3 steps and 10 steps and then 50 steps. And that refers particularly to something that is a kind of a therapy called systematic desensitization, which I will talk a lot about in another video that I will devote exclusively to that. That is one thing that actually did help me a lot. And these days, if I can enforce it, it still helps me a lot. Another thing that we seem to have in common is that everything that we do, everything pretty much, is overshadowed by anxiety. Our first thought is, in any given situation, is what is the emotional price in terms of anxiety am I going to pay if I decide to do this thing? And that can be so uncomfortable and so distracting. But it's always running in the back. If it's not in the forefront of our mind, it's always running in the background of our mind. And having an anxiety disorder is basically a very self-centered thing. It can be, because we're preoccupied with how we feel. And I think for me, one of the main reasons for that is that it's very unpredictable. I can feel one way one minute and then totally a different way for no apparent reason the next minute. So I feel like my body betrays me. Um, it's very hard to commit to things when you don't have any clue what's going to happen from minute to minute. You may make a commitment today because you're feeling like you're in a relatively good place, but by the time that event comes around, you think, well, what was I thinking? You know, this isn't something I can do or usually do. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to do it. It just means that it is hard for us to comfortably be able to say, yeah, sure, I can do that, or Thursday, let's do this or that, because we just don't know how we're going to feel, often literally from minute to minute. Sometimes anxiety is used to cover our emotions, our real emotions, and it even tries to be a friend. It lets us know that something isn't quite right. And I know for me, as a child, that I wasn't allowed, like many other people, to really feel my feelings. Anxiety took over, and I had just one emotion, and it was anxiety. And today, I mean, it's better. I can feel other feelings, but usually if I'm in a difficult situation or having a problem, even with a person, the first thing that will happen is that I'll get anxious. And then I will have to stop and back up and try to look at what is really bothering me. And then if I can get in touch with that true emotion, the anxiety subsides. It's amazing. So spending time with yourself, trying to really get in touch with the emotions that are going on inside of you, can be very helpful in relieving and getting to the root of some of your anxiety. Triggers for anxiety can be any number of things. They can even be unconscious, which makes it particularly difficult in trying to deal with something that you have no clue where it's coming from. They say that there's always a trigger, but often it feels like we have no clue. We're just smacked with how we feel. For myself, often it's not like I'm sitting around saying, oh, this is a horrible situation, you know, and working myself up to getting scared. It's that it does come out of the blue. And one of the most exasperating things, I think, can be when I'm even looking forward to something. I'm clearly in a good space about it, or looking forward to seeing somebody or meeting somebody, and then they arrive and I'm blown out of the water with the anxiety, and I can't figure out why, because I'm not telling myself anything scary about it. I like the person, I haven't seen them, I'm looking forward to seeing them, but my body just runs amok, and I find myself in a situation that I wished I wasn't in. Sometimes, another thing that we have in common, and this is kind of interesting, sometimes we have to do things in the exact moment that we feel that we can do them. I, from time to time, have little spurts where I feel like I can go out in the car. If a friend comes that I trust, and I may just look at the car and say, hey, take me for a ride around the corner, or up to the corner store. And I don't know where it comes from. Just in that moment, I feel like I can do it. But if I don't act on it, and if the person that's here doesn't grab their keys and run with me, it's gone. On the other hand, for a lot of other things, we may have to really, really plan it out. This relates a little bit to what I was talking about, needing control. Say you want to go to church or something like that out in the community. You may really have to think about where you're going to sit. You know, will there be an opening in the back seat so you have easy access to get out the door so you can entrap yourself? Having an escape route is very important. So we contradict ourselves a lot of the time, and it just depends on the situation, what we need. But it can be either of those things. It's happened either way for me. Change of any kind is usually very difficult for us. We love the predictable. Again, this relates to control. I want to know that my house is going to be here the way it was when I get up. My routine is going to be the same, and hopefully nobody or nothing will interrupt it. I have studied, I think I mentioned this in the first video a little bit too, I've studied Buddhism a little bit, and one of their teachings is about impermanence in all things. And it's true, if you think about life. Everything is very impermanent. Everything changes, everything comes and goes. But I go kicking and screaming into that particular teaching. And I wish everything would always be the same. For us in particular, it's very important to have as much consistency as possible, especially when we're feeling at our worst. I remember there was an instructor that I had met many years ago. I was for a while a counselor. I was a counselor for many years, but for a short time I was a counselor in a drug rehab unit. And I called in a guest speaker, and I had found out that she had herself had a period in her life when she was agoraphobic. So I was picking her brain a little bit, and she told me something very interesting. She said, when you're feeling your worst, don't change anything. Don't even change your clothes. And she didn't mean don't be clean. She meant don't put anything different on. Nothing unusual. Don't put on a new blouse. Make sure that whatever you have around you is familiar, to try to get that anxiety down. And I thought that was a very interesting comment. And it reminds me today of the article that I am in the process of working on with this reporter for the Tampa Times. But he asked me one day how I chose my clothes, or what I wore every day. And I thought it was an interesting question. Well, first I thought it was a boring question, like I get up and I just decide what I want to put on. But then he said, like, if somebody's coming or something's different, how do you decide what you're going to wear? And I thought about it. And it was an interesting and insightful question. Because when I thought about it, I realized that I have come to realize that over time, I've changed the way I deal with that. Because I began to notice if I had somebody coming to the house that I wanted to look nice for, or got unusually dressed up for, something in my body would start reacting and I'd get more anxious. And then I realized I was getting more anxious because I knew that something was different. And uh-oh, this must be a big event because I'm dressing differently. So from that time on, as much as I may want to, when I have somebody come to the house, I just make sure that I put on something that's, nice and clean and fresh, but also very comfortable and familiar. So something that subtle can make a big difference in how we feel. And keeping as best we can with the familiar is generally helpful for us. And again, that doesn't mean don't try to stretch and grow. But if you do it in small increments so that the change isn't so great and the anxiety reaction won't be as devastating. Another thing that's difficult for us is making commitments. And I think that's fairly obvious. It's along the lines of what we've been talking about. It's hard to make a commitment because we don't know how we're going to feel the time that the commitment rolls around. It's very frustrating never knowing how you're going to feel. You may strongly want to do something, but don't feel that we can know confidently that we will be able to do that. And it's very frustrating, and it can make us feel in many ways like a failure, and less than. But we need to be kind to ourselves and just accept that this is the lot we have been dealt, and to try to play out that hand in life, because it's what we have, and much better to accept, always much better to just accept where you're at than to try to beat yourself up for what you can't do. Again, along those lines, one thing I want to say about myself, the minute that I get out of bed, I'm very routine, and it's difficult for me to break my routine. I do break my routine, but it's not without a great deal of challenge. And I've learned over the years that life changes on a dime for many reasons. So in the morning, I mean, the minute I get out of bed, I may even put my garbage out for the next day. I put my mail out, I get my dogs taken care of, I have a bird. And I try to do everything to keep up with. I mean, I have a fairly active life. I have a lot of things I need to keep up with. So I do everything as soon as I get up and as orderly as I can and just go through the day. Sometimes it's not always how you feel on any given day. It really and truly is on any given minute, because it does change. Moods and feelings can change very quickly. Okay. Something that I wanted to mention also, that at times of severe anxiety, if we're having an especially bad period or a bad spell, we can feel, we get like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. We have a need to always feel prepared. And this may include doing something that might be unusual to other people. Things like, especially at nighttime, maybe if we're going to bed or if we're staying in our bedroom because we want to have some downtime and remove ourselves from the activity of the day, we can bring with us everything we can think of that we might need in case we're not able to get up, that we're going to be frozen in fear. And I'm not saying this applies to everybody, but we tend to want to build little nests, safety nests. And we could take water with us, some food in case we're hungry during the night, or we feel that we might not be able to get up in the morning if we're too frightened or having a panic attack. It could be medications and tissues and even a bucket if we think we're going to be sick, towel, cold rag. It's just the need to be prepared in case we can't perform. And I think a lot of us can do that from time to time. We are also unusually burdened with something called anticipatory anxiety, or what-if thinking. It's really not a friend of ours. Before we're going to do something in the future, a doctor's appointment, whatever it is, that may be coming up next week, we can stay frozen every minute from today until next week, anticipating what's going to happen, afraid of what's going to happen. We what if ourselves to death. What if I do this? What if that happens? What if I faint? What if I, go crazy? I don't like to talk about symptoms too much here. I really don't want to, because we all know how we feel, and if somebody mentions one that we don't have, we're inclined to get it. But what if thinking is definitely not our friend. Catastrophic thinking. We always think the worst, imagine the worst, and that comes from our very creative and imaginative brains, which is not a bad thing most of the time, but it can get in our way. One thing that can help with this is something called mindful meditation, which is very popular these days. It helps to keep you in the moment and only be with yourself and how you're feeling now, but also what's going on in this moment, and not be thinking about what's going on next week, because our minds tend to race and run away with us, for sure. One paradox is that when you're anxious, it's hard to talk about where you're at, for some people. You're so anxious you may not even want to talk about it or be able to talk about it. And then when you're calm, you don't want to talk about it because you're afraid it'll make you anxious and it'll bring those thoughts to mind. So writing is often a good way to get your feelings out. I mean, talking about how you feel is definitely a good thing. You can talk to friends or family or a good counselor, you know, about how you're feeling. It really is a release. But I think we have that little contradictory thing going on where sometimes it doesn't seem to be a good time to talk about it. Medical attention can also be a very challenging thing for us. We're afraid of what the doctor's going to find. We're afraid of what we'll be able to deal with the doctor's going to find. Some of myself, I have had difficulty getting medical attention, and I do have medical people that can come to the house now, but I'm afraid to have my blood pressure taken because I don't know what it is, because they when they're here, my blood pressure is always up, so that scares me. And it's a very quirky thing. I know I'm not the only one with this particular problem, but again, in increments, if you can get a medical person to work with you, you know, and you can find out what your overall medical health is, it certainly is the way to go. Again, in small increments, if you can do that. It's unfortunate that a lot of us don't get the medical attention we need because we either can't find it, don't have someone to come to the home, or we're afraid to go and face it for fear that we won't be able to deal with the consequences of it. On the other hand, there are some people who can go out and can get to the doctor, who constantly want to go to be reassured that whatever it is they're feeling is only anxiety and there isn't something wrong. So medical attention can be challenging. I'd also like to make a note here, if I could, for anybody that has knowledge of medical people, not even just medical people, in-home services of any kind, no matter what state you live in or what city you live in, if you could email me through my website at livingwithagoraphobia.com. That's living-with-agoraphobia.com. There's a place on there you'll see where I'm starting a list of medical services. They can be so hard to find, and if you have any services in your area, people that come to your home, and it doesn't just have to be medical, it could be anything. I'd appreciate it if you send me that information. If these people are willing to be listed, I'd like to get them on the website. Maybe make like an Angie's list for agoraphobia. Okay, just have a couple more points here, and one is that most of us seem to have a need to be organized. I think a lack of control inside with our emotions creates a need to have things in our environment neat and orderly. I'm sure that's not true for everybody, but I think that it is true for a lot of us, and I think that's where it comes from. That it makes us feel like we have some kind of control over our life. Okay, and for some people, such as myself, it may take a long time to get home repairs done. This goes along with wanting to keep our home environment and our safe place safe, bringing people in when we don't know how long they're going to stay, we don't know how intricate the problem is. Unknowns are very difficult for us. It makes it hard to do that and have other people around. So I know myself, I had a bathroom faucet that was leaking for forever, and I just didn't want to call a repairman. And right now, even my cable TV, it's very, pixelated, and I'd rather deal with that than deal with the cable guy coming. And I'm not saying I won't, it's just that I have to be in the frame of mind to be able to deal with that. It takes us, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 more steps to do what the average person can do in one. They can just so easily take it in stride and say, I'll call a cable guy, he'll be here Tuesday at 4, and then at 6 the other guy will be here. And it's not usually the way for us. We have to plan things out very strategically. Many of us are also socially phobic, like myself, and unfortunately we may dread holidays, Christmas, birthdays, anything where we feel like we are placed in a have-to situation. This is a day we have to celebrate, we have to be with people, we have to perform, we have to be okay, and that can be very threatening to us. And it can also create a lot of problems with the family and friends. But I think a lot of us have that in common. Our self-talk, I mentioned this or hit on this a little bit before, can be very detrimental to us. We usually think in terms of catastrophic thinking or awfulizing situations. Uh, we are so creative. Our brains have got such imagination that in this case we're always imagining the worst possible case scenarios, and it definitely does not work in our favor. And again, if we can find a way to stay in the moment, uh, maybe do some meditation, mindful meditation, try to live this day, in this day as it is, it's the best way to try to combat that. Okay, I have mentioned here several quirks, that we all may have in common. Yes, we can be very sensitive. Yes, we can be overreactive and need to reel in our thoughts from time to time. But we also are people who have some very outstanding characteristics as a whole, as a group. And I would like to give you some of them now. First, as I mentioned before, we're very creative and very imaginative people, and in the best of ways. We're very loving, very lovable, very interesting people to be around. A lot of fun to be around. Normally, when the anxiety is not strangling us, and sometimes that's how it feels, because who we really are inside gets stifled. I know for myself. I mean, I love who I am and how I am socially. I'm socially phobic, but I'm not afraid of people. I'm not afraid to talk. I'm not afraid that I won't come up with something to say. It's the situation. It's the feeling trapped in that social situation. But when the anxiety, if I have times when the anxiety is down, I mean, I have a lot of fun, and I think people enjoy me. And it's a contradiction, that you're socially phobic, but you really love people and you have an outgoing personality. But it happens to be the truth. We're also, as a group, very intelligent and have very high potential for accomplishing all kinds of things in this life. And we also have a reputation for being very honest, very real, and very ethical. And those are all very wonderful qualities to have. So it's important that we know that we are much more than just our anxiety. The anxiety is just a very small part of who we are. So please always try to keep that in mind and try to continue to develop yourself from all sides, because we're many faceted, Because the anxiety is so powerful, I know we tend to think only about it, but there is truly, truly so much more to each and every one of us than anxiety. Now I'd like to end by saying namaste to all of you. And that's a beautiful word, a word that I love. It's a Sanskrit word, a greeting actually, that is still used in everyday India. And basically, in rough translation, and there are many translations of it, it simply means the spirit within me bows to the spirit within you. And when you are in that place in you, and I am in that place in me, we are one. So namaste. And have a great day, and I hope to see you in part 3, coming up very soon. Bye-bye.